You woke up this morning with the same thought you had yesterday, and the day before that, and the week before that. You lay there, staring at the ceiling, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a familiar voice whispered, "This is it. This is your life. And it's not going to change." You felt the weight of it pressing down on your chest. The job you don't love, the relationship that feels hollow, the dreams you've quietly filed away under someday or too late or not for someone like me. You got up anyway. You went through the motions. You did what was expected. And the whole time, beneath the surface, there was this quiet ache, this sense that you were meant for something more, something different, something that actually feels like living. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? You've had that moment when you looked around at your life and thought, how did I get here? When did I stop moving forward? When did I start settling for this? You've told yourself the story 1,000 times. You're stuck. You're trapped. The circumstances of your life have boxed you in, and there's simply no way out. But what if I told you that everything you believe about being stuck is a lie? What if the walls you see around you are not made of stone, but of thought? What if the cage you've been living in has no lock and never did? Stay with me tonight, because what I'm about to share with you has the power to change everything. Not because I have some secret formula or magic solution, but because you are about to see something you've been missing, something that's been right in front of you all along. You are not stuck unless you decide to be. Let that land for a moment. Really, let it in. You are not stuck unless you decide to be. This changes everything. Let's look honestly at what you call being stuck. When you tell yourself you're stuck, what do you point to? You point to something external. Your job, your relationship, your financial situation, your health, your age, your location. You say, I can't change because of this, and this is always something outside yourself. But notice what's actually happening when you declare yourself stuck. You're not describing a physical reality. You're describing a perception. You're describing a thought you've had so many times that it now feels like concrete. Here's what I've observed after a lifetime of exploring this territory. The feeling of being stuck almost never comes from your situation itself. It comes from the story you've constructed about your situation. Think about this carefully. Two people can be in nearly identical circumstances, same job, same income, same city, same challenges, and one feels completely stuck while the other sees possibility everywhere. The circumstances haven't changed. Only the inner lens has changed. So what creates your lens? What makes you see walls while someone else sees doors? It begins with what I call the comfort of the familiar. Your ego, that part of you that's terrified of the unknown, has a very specific job. Its job is to keep you safe. And to your ego, safe means unchanged. Your ego doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It only cares that tomorrow looks like today. Because anything unknown registers as potential threat. So when you start to contemplate change, real change, meaningful change, your ego launches a campaign of resistance. And its most powerful weapon is this simple phrase: you can't. You can't leave this job because you need the security. You can't end this relationship because you've invested too many years. You can't start over because you're too old, too young, too inexperienced, too established. You can't. You can't. You can't. And here's the thing about your ego's you can't message. It always sounds reasonable. It always has evidence. It always points to legitimate concerns. That's what makes it so seductive. But your ego is not giving you truth. Your ego is giving you fear, dressed up as wisdom. Let me give you an example. Picture yourself at 41, working in a job that pays the bills but leaves you empty. For 12 years, you've dreamed of doing something different, maybe starting a business, maybe pursuing a creative passion, maybe simply working somewhere that doesn't drain your soul. Every time the dream surfaces, your mind immediately produces a list. The failure rate of new ventures, the financial risk, your lack of experience in that field, your family obligations, what people would think if you walked away from a good job. The list is so comprehensive, so logical, that you don't even recognize it as fear. You think you're being practical. You think you're being responsible. You think you're weighing your options carefully, but you're not weighing anything. You've already decided. You decided years ago that safety was more important than aliveness. And now your mind simply generates evidence to support that decision. This is what your stuck mind does. It decides first, then rationalizes second. Have you noticed this in your own life? Have you noticed how your reasons for not changing always seem to arrive fully formed, as if they were facts rather than choices? Here's what you probably don't realize. Your prison isn't made of circumstances. Your prison is made of conclusions. You concluded something about yourself or your life maybe years ago, maybe decades ago, and now that conclusion filters everything you see. I'm not the kind of person who takes risks. People like me don't get those opportunities. It's too late for someone in my situation. These aren't observations. These are beliefs that have calcified into identity. And as long as they remain unexamined, they will continue to shape your reality. Let me share something else I've observed. When you feel stuck, you almost always focus on the magnitude of change required. You look at the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and the gap seems so vast that movement feels impossible. But this is a misunderstanding of how change actually works. Change doesn't require you to leap across canyons. Change only asks you to take one step, then another, then another. Your transformation happens not in the dramatic gesture, but in the quiet accumulation of small movements. Think about a time when you felt trapped in a situation, maybe a relationship, maybe a job, maybe a living arrangement. Remember how you collapsed all possible action into one dramatic option? Leave or stay. Quit or endure. All or nothing. And because the dramatic option felt impossible, you concluded you were powerless. But that's not how it works. Between leave and stay exactly as things are, exist thousands of possible actions. A conversation, a boundary, a change in your own behavior, a request, a new way of being present, a period of honest reflection about what you actually want. You weren't stuck in your situation. You were stuck in your imagination. You couldn't see your options because you were only looking for the exit. This is crucial. When you tell yourself you're stuck, you're usually not seeing the full landscape of possibility. You're seeing only 2 or 3 options, all of which seem unacceptable, and concluding that there's no way forward. But there are always more options than you can see. Always. Your limitation isn't in reality, it's in your perception of reality. Stop for a moment. Really hear what I'm saying. The bars of your cage are made of thoughts you keep thinking. And thoughts can be changed. They can be questioned. They can be replaced. This is not wishful thinking. This is the fundamental nature of consciousness. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices your thoughts. And from that place of awareness, everything becomes possible. So if being stuck is a choice rather than a condition, why do you keep choosing it? Why would you voluntarily remain in a life that doesn't fulfill you? This is where we need to go deeper. This is where you need to understand the hidden mechanics of your self-imposed limitation. The first thing to understand is that staying stuck serves a purpose for you. It always serves a purpose. If it didn't, you wouldn't do it. Now, this might sound strange. How could remaining trapped possibly serve you? But consider this. As long as you're stuck, you don't have to face the uncertainty of change. As long as you're stuck, you don't have to risk failure. As long as you're stuck, you get to remain comfortable, even if that comfort is miserable. There's a peculiar kind of safety in familiar suffering. Your current dissatisfaction may be painful, but at least it's predictable. At least you know what to expect. At least you've learned how to survive it. The unknown doesn't offer that comfort. The unknown says, I might be better, but I might be worse. You'll have to step into me to find out. And for you, like for most people, that uncertainty might be more terrifying than your current unhappiness. So the first mechanism of your stuckness is this: the preference for known pain over unknown possibility. Your ego would rather you be miserable and safe than risk being challenged and uncertain. The second mechanism is even more subtle. It's what I call identity attachment. Over time, you've built a sense of who you are. You've constructed a self-concept from your experiences, your roles, your relationships, your beliefs, your past. And this self-concept, while it might not make you happy, gives you something very important: a sense of continuity, of coherence, of knowing who you are in the world. Change threatens that self-concept. If you leave the job you've held for 20 years, who are you? If you end the relationship that has defined your adult life, who are you? If you stop believing the things you've always believed, who are you? These are terrifying questions, and you will do almost anything to avoid facing them, including remaining stuck in a life that doesn't serve you. But here's what I want you to understand, and this is perhaps the most important insight I can offer you tonight. You are not your story. You are not your past. You are not your circumstances. You are not even your self-concept. You are the consciousness that experiences all of these things. You are the awareness that exists before your story, beneath your story, beyond your story, and that awareness is not stuck. That awareness cannot be stuck. It is vast and infinite and always free. The part of you that feels trapped is your ego. The part of you that knows you're free is your essence. And the moment you shift your identification from ego to essence, your walls begin to dissolve. This is what all spiritual traditions have pointed toward. This is what the mystics have always known. You are not your thoughts, your fears, your roles, your history. You are the eternal presence that witnesses all of it. From that place, from that deeper awareness, stuck becomes impossible. Because from that place, you recognize that you are never actually trapped. You are only ever believing in your traps. Let me show you what I mean. Think about how you experience feeling stuck in something you hate. Maybe your job, maybe a situation, maybe a pattern in your life. Watch what happens in your mind. You wake up dreading the day. You spend hours thinking about how much you dislike your circumstances. You complain to friends. You fantasize about escape. You tell yourself you have no options. Now notice what you're not doing. You're not updating your resume. You're not exploring other possibilities. You're not developing new skills. You're not having honest conversations. You're not restructuring your finances to give yourself more freedom. You're not questioning whether your definition of acceptable might be limiting you. In other words, you're spending enormous energy thinking about being stuck while spending almost no energy actually moving. This is your trap within the trap. The mental energy you devote to your stuckness actively prevents you from becoming unstuck. You exhaust yourself with worry, complaint, and rumination, leaving nothing for the actual work of change. But here's what changes everything. The moment you realize that your stuckness is maintained by your own attention, by where you choose to focus your mind, you gain an extraordinary power. Because attention can be redirected. You can take the same mental energy you've been using to contemplate your limitations and redirect it toward your possibilities. You can take the hours you've spent worrying and convert them to planning. You can take the emotional weight of your despair and transform it into fuel for action. This isn't about positive thinking. I'm not asking you to pretend everything is fine when it isn't. I'm asking you to notice where your attention goes and to recognize that you have a choice about that. What you focus on expands. What you give your attention to grows. If you focus on your walls become more solid. If you focus on your doors, even small doors, even cracks in the walls, those openings become more visible, more accessible, more real. Here's what nobody talks about when it comes to feeling stuck. It's actually exhausting for you to maintain the illusion of being trapped. It takes constant mental effort to keep not seeing the options that are available to you. It takes energy to keep telling yourself the same story of limitation day after day. What if you simply stopped? What if, just for today, you stopped rehearsing your reasons for why things can't change? What if you stopped collecting evidence for your stuckness? What if you let your mind rest from the endless project of convincing yourself that you're powerless? I've seen what happens when people do this. I've seen people who spent years believing they couldn't change suddenly realize that the cage door was never locked. They had simply never tried to push it open. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Robert. At 62, after decades of telling himself he was too old to start over, he had a quiet realization. He was sitting in his garden one evening, and it really occurred to him, not as an idea, but as a felt truth, that his life wasn't a sentence to be served, but an experience to be created. In that moment, something shifted. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or fanfare, just a subtle but profound change in how he saw himself and his circumstances. Within a year, he had moved to a new city, started a small consulting practice, and begun learning Spanish, something he'd wanted to do since his 20s. Nothing about his external circumstances had changed to make this possible. Only his internal relationship to those circumstances had shifted. He told me later, "I spent 30 years waiting for permission to live my life. Then I realized I was the only one who could give it." This is the truth that sets you free. You are not waiting for circumstances to change. You are not waiting for permission. You are not waiting for the right moment, or the right resources, or the right support. You are only waiting for yourself to decide that waiting is over. So how do you move from understanding this to actually living it? How do you translate insight into transformation? Let me be honest with you. Understanding that you're not stuck is important, but it's not sufficient. You might understand this intellectually and yet remain exactly where you are. Your mind grasps the truth while your life stays unchanged. What's required is practice. Not effort in the sense of strain and struggle, but consistent, gentle practice. The rewiring of your deeply ingrained patterns. Here's where you begin. First, you must become aware of your stuckness story. You must notice, actually notice, the specific thoughts you think when you feel trapped. What do you tell yourself? What are the exact words? What are the images? What are the assumptions buried in your story? This noticing is not judgment. You're not trying to stop your thoughts or argue with them. You're simply becoming aware of them. You're stepping back from the movie and noticing that you're watching a movie. This sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. Because the moment you notice a thought, you're no longer completely identified with it. You've created a small space between you and the thought. And in that space, choice becomes possible. So here's what I want you to do. Tonight, before you sleep, take 5 minutes to sit quietly. And in those 5 minutes, invite your stuckness story to present itself. Let your mind show you all the reasons you can't change, all the ways you're trapped, all the obstacles that seem immovable. Don't argue with these thoughts. Don't resist them. Just watch them. Notice their texture, their flavor, their emotional charge. Notice how familiar they are, how many times you've thought these exact thoughts before. And then ask yourself one simple question. Is this thought absolutely true? Can I know with complete certainty that this thought is true? Not does it seem true, not does it feel true, but is it absolutely true? In my experience, when you really examine your limiting thoughts, you find that you cannot know they're absolutely true. You find that they're interpretations, not facts. Conclusions, not certainties. This creates space. This creates the opening through which change can enter your life. The second practice involves your attention. Every day, you have a limited amount of attention to spend. Think of it as a currency. Where you spend it determines what grows in your life. You probably spend your attention unconsciously. You let your mind wander wherever habit takes it, usually to worry, to complaint, to rehearsal of problems, to mental arguments with people who aren't present. But here's what you do instead. Starting today, not someday, starting today, for 15 minutes each morning, deliberately direct your attention toward possibility. Not fantasy, not wishful thinking, but genuine possibility. Ask yourself, if I were not stuck, what would I do today? What small step would I take? What conversation would I have? What would I allow myself to consider? And then this is crucial. Take one of those small steps. Even if it seems insignificant, even if your mind tells you it won't matter, take the step. Because here's what I've learned in all my years of exploring these questions. The universe responds to movement. It doesn't respond to good intentions. It doesn't respond to plans. It responds to movement. When you take even a tiny step in a new direction, you signal to yourself and to life that you are no longer defined by your limitations. You demonstrate through action that change is possible. And this demonstration creates momentum. Not large movements, not heroic leaps, just small, consistent steps that gradually reshape the landscape of your life. The third practice is perhaps the most challenging, and it involves your identity. For as long as you identify as a stuck person, you will remain stuck. Not because identity is destiny, but because identity shapes perception, and perception shapes action. So you must begin to identify differently, not as someone who will someday be free, but as someone who is inherently free and is now choosing to exercise that freedom. This is simpler than you think. It begins with changing the internal language you use. Instead of I can't, try I'm choosing not to. Instead of I'm trapped, try I'm currently here and I'm exploring my options. Instead of it's too late, try I don't know what's possible from here. These aren't just word games. The language you use internally shapes your experience of reality. When you say I can't, you reinforce helplessness. When you say I'm choosing, you reinforce agency. And agency, even the smallest experience of agency, opens doors. Now, I want to address something directly. There will be a voice in you that says this is too simple. That voice will say, he doesn't understand my situation. My circumstances are different. My obstacles are real. I hear that voice. I honor its concerns. But I want you to consider something. That voice, the one that insists your case is special, your walls are uniquely solid, your traps are genuinely inescapable, that voice is your ego. And your ego's job, remember, is to keep you safe by keeping you the same. The voice isn't lying to you, exactly. It's offering a perspective shaped by fear. And you can acknowledge that perspective without being ruled by it. Yes, your circumstances may be challenging. Yes, the obstacles may be real. Yes, your path forward may be unclear. And also, you are not stuck unless you decide to be. Both things can be true. Your life can be difficult and you can be free. Your challenges can be real and your response to them can be chosen. This is the paradox of human existence. You are shaped by your circumstances and you are not defined by them. You live within constraints and you are fundamentally unlimited. You face genuine obstacles and you always have choice about how you meet them. Do you remember where we began tonight? You, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling yourself that your life isn't going to change? I want you to see that moment differently now. I want you to see that your story isn't about your circumstances. It's about your thoughts about your circumstances. It's about the decision you make, moment after moment, to believe that your life is fixed, finished, determined. And I want you to see the power you have, the power to decide. You can decide to remain in the story you've been telling yourself. You can decide that the walls are real, the doors are locked, the situation is hopeless. That's a choice, and you're free to make it. Or you can decide something different. You can decide that this moment, this very moment, is the beginning of something new. Not because your circumstances have changed, not because anyone has given you permission, but because you have recognized a fundamental truth about your own nature. You are not your thoughts. You are not your fears. You are not your history. You are the awareness that perceives all of these things, and that awareness is always free. There's a question I've carried with me for many years. It's a question I return to whenever I feel the walls closing in, whenever my own mind starts to construct its familiar prisons. The question is this: what would I do right now if I knew I could not fail? Sit with that for a moment. Don't rush past it. What would you do right now if you knew you could not fail? Notice what arises. Notice the dreams that surface, the impulses that emerge, the longings that have been waiting patiently beneath your fears. These are not random fantasies. These are signals from your deeper self, pointing toward the life that wants to live through you. You've probably spent years ignoring these signals. You dismissed them as impractical. You labeled them as childish or unrealistic. You told yourself that such things are for other people, people with more talent, more resources, more luck, more time. But what if those signals are not distractions from your real life? What if they are your real life, calling to you through the noise of your conditioning? I've come to believe that the feeling of being stuck is actually a form of homesickness. It's the ache of your soul that knows it was meant for something more, something deeper, something truer. And that ache never fully goes away, no matter how successfully you distract yourself from it. You can numb it with busyness. You can drown it in entertainment. You can pretend it doesn't exist, but it will keep returning. Morning after morning, evening after evening, reminding you that you are not living the life you came here to live. This is not a punishment. This is a gift. Your ache is a compass. It's pointing you toward your own freedom. So here's the one practice I want to leave you with tonight. It's simple, concrete, and you can do it today. Find 5 minutes of quiet, sit comfortably, and ask yourself this question. If I knew, really knew, that I was completely free to design my life, what would I do differently tomorrow? Don't edit the answers. Don't evaluate them. Just let them come. Write them down if you can. Let them exist outside your head, where you can see them clearly. Some of them will surprise you. Some of them will frighten you. Some of them will feel impossible. And then, tomorrow, do one of those things. Just one, however small. If the answer was, I would have a difficult conversation, have that conversation. If the answer was, I would apply for that position, send the application. If the answer was, I would spend an hour doing something I love, protect that hour as if your life depended on it. Because in a very real sense, it does. This is how your walls become doors. This is how your stories become choices. This is how stuck becomes free. Not through struggle, not through dramatic transformation, but through the quiet, persistent recognition that you are not what you have believed yourself to be. You are infinitely more. You have always been infinitely more. The life you long for is not waiting somewhere in the distant future. It's not hiding behind some obstacle you need to overcome first. It's here, now, in this moment, waiting for you to claim it. Waiting for you to stop telling the story of why you can't have it. Every morning you wake up is a new beginning. Every breath you take is an opportunity to choose differently. Your past does not have to equal your future. The story you told yourself yesterday does not have to be the story you tell yourself today. You are the author of your experience. You always have been. And the pen has never left your hand. And the only thing between you and that recognition is a thought you can choose to release. So let it go. Let it go and see what remains. What remains is you timeless, unlimited, and always free. You were never stuck. You were only dreaming that you were. And now you can wake up.